Okay, so the first thing I want to do while I'm waiting to do the math and everything, some things I can keep doing. One of the things I want to do is figure out how to mount the motor. So there's a couple of things that we have to pay attention to for the motor, a couple of kind of small rules to follow. Some I'm going to make up myself, and some I'm going to just use the laws of physics to explain. But, okay, so this motor is going to drive this sprocket with this chain. And it's going to be, going forward, it's going to be pulling on this top chain. So it's to turn the wheels forward. So the torque will be this way, pulling the top chain, and the bottom chain will be slack. When you slow down or go reverse, it goes the opposite. Now the torque goes into this chain, this one becomes slack, and then and the weight changes from the front to the back of the, or the front of the machine to the motor. So my goal is to, I have to do a couple things I want to do. Logic tells me that the center of this shaft and the center of this swing arm should be as close to each other as possible. And the reason for that is that so when the back wheel moves up and down, because there's going to be a shock in here. In here, so the back end is going to be spring loaded. As the swing arm moves up and down, the tension is going to change. If this center is too far from this center, the tension on the chain is going to change too much. So if there's weight on it, the chain might run loose. If there's no weight on it, it might run tight. I could use an adjustable shock to kind of minimize that, but I don't want to get that crazy with things. So I do want to get this center as close to this center as possible. Now I can put this center anywhere I want at this point because the swing arm isn't fastened. So I got to put a couple brackets back here to mount the swing arm. The reason I wanted it back farther from where originally is I want to have more space in here for motors and electronics and battery. This swing arm used to pivot here, and I've moved it. I want to move it back, so I'm going to have to weld a couple brackets to here and make up some bushings for the rear swing arm, and then get the shock mounted back in. So the mount of the motor is going to sit somewhere near where it is. Now, I've decided that I want to use the brakes on this machine. And if you're sitting in it, it's easy to use the brakes. You step on a brake pedal and you stop. But with nobody in the machine, how do you apply the brakes? The brakes are kind of a hydraulic, mechanical pedal to a hydraulic system to a mechanical brake cylinder at the back. And it grubs in this disc and it slows the machine down. So I want to be able to apply this brake remotely or when I want to stop the machine. To do that with a remote control radio system or an autonomous system sounds like it might be difficult. How do you control, when you're driving the vehicle yourself, you can control how hard you step on the brakes by the feel in your foot. That's going to be very difficult to do electrically, at least with the technology I have. So I have an idea. When this motor is dry, I want to get the natural torque of the motor to do that. So, like I said before, when the motor's revving forward, this one's tight. And if you look at it, so when it comes tight, this motor would want to tip back like so, right? Because it's pulling on the top. It wants to pull this motor back like that. So if I mounted this motor on a pivot where I could take advantage of that, when it torques forward, or to go forward, it's going to torque. The motor comes back maybe against a stop, maybe held there by springs, so it wants to sit there. When you back off on the throttle and to slow down, and even if you want to stop, you can kind of plug the controller into reverse. The bottom chain is going to come tight, and it's going to want to tip the motor back forward again. So what I want to do is investigate the possibility of putting this motor on a pivot and using the mechanical motion of it tipping back and forth to apply a master cylinder for a brake. So the master cylinder that you step on with your brake pedal, I want to kind of fasten something under here, some sort of master cylinder that relies on the natural motion of the reaction of this motor to put the brake on when you slow down quickly. So I built this bracket here already to hold the motor, practicing my aluminum TIG welding, a skill that I have been looking forward to learning, and this is giving me a reason to do it. So I built this bracket. It's not too bad, you know, I need some more practice, but I think it's sturdy enough. And I think what I'll do is take advantage of the fact that this angle is already here, which will put this shaft closer to this shaft. I would love to have them in line to each other. This one, and this one all in the same line. That would be the most efficient use, but I'm not sure whether I'm going to be able to do that or not. So then maybe this motor pivots in the middle or at the top. I'm not sure where it's going to pivot, but this motor, I think, needs to be able to rock back and forth as it torques and untorques the rear. Spring loaded, so it doesn't go bang bang every time we change direction. And I'm going to try to use this rocking motion to apply the brakes. So I'm going to be kind of fiddling with that a little bit, trying to figure a way to mount this thing. Have to make up a plate or something that goes across here to keep it in line. Right, of course it has to stay in line this way. So that the motor's in, you know, it's got to come to the right a little bit anyway. So I'm going to play around with trying to get a mount, get the motor lined up, get the swing arm mounted on. I think I have to mount this first, but looking at where the motor is, I think it warrants that this mounts fairly high up here. Of course, I have to make sure I don't mount it so high that the vehicle sits on an angle. When I took this vehicle apart, sitting on these blocks was about level with the wheels on. So that's why I'm using these blocks as kind of a guide. Sitting on the blocks is about the right ride height. So that's my next project is to figure out how to mount this motor.